Good ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers, when she isn't jet-setting around Africa spreading digital feminism, she's at the University of Auckland Film, Television and Media Studies Department deconstructing torture movies for their socio-political values. Ladies and gentlemen, blogger Phoebe Fletcher. And when my next guest announced she was running for Citizens and Ratepayers, I thought that would be the last I ever saw of her, in the way I wouldn't see someone who had just become an evangelical Christian. She's as liberal as Michelle Bogue will allow. She's a former media producing phenomena and future National Party list candidate, Claudette Huiti. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1. How has the Christchurch earthquake been handled politically and by the media? If the answer was putting Jerry Brownlee in charge of the quake response, was the question, what won't help? Issue 2. Land Information Minister Maurice Williamson says we are being racist about the Chinese-backed company wanting to buy Crayfor Farms. This is the same company that just donated $200,000 to his political party. What would he call us for $500,000? Issue 3 tonight. Who is winning the Super City race, John Banks or Len Brown, and does anyone care? And we'll end the show on a final word. But let's kick things off with issue 1. The earthquake in Christchurch has shocked everyone by the widespread damage and, thankfully, lack of fatalities. But how has the government and media response to it been? Phoebe, Mike McRoberts from TV3 tweeted that he thought it was a poor decision by 3 not to go with continuous coverage throughout the day. TVNZ gained 2 million viewers on the Saturday, while on Sunday, TV3's The Nation for the first time almost outrated and rated almost as high as TVNZ's Q&A. Is this a crass example of corporate media using natural disasters for ratings fodder, or an argument as to why it's so important in times of crisis to have a public broadcaster?
I think you'd have to say that it would be both. Certainly we do need a public broadcaster in times of crisis so that people can tune in and see what's going on. But crisis also equals ratings, okay, for news channels. Certainly 9/11 and the death of Diana, for example, were huge events in terms of television news, and Marianne Doan, for example, has written on how television really seeks to gain as much as it can out of these crises. We get this kind of non-stop continuous coverage. We quite often go to witnesses who have no sort of expert opinion, but the goal is to extend out the coverage. And I think it's important to remember that news actually functions as a loss leader in television, and that it's something that you spend a lot of money on in the hope that people might stay on the channel for the rest of the night. So certainly catastrophes do equal profit for news stations. In terms of TV3 not having the continuous coverage, I believe they had technical difficulties, and that's the only reason why they didn't. So
is that the reason why we need to have a public broadcaster?
Well, I think that TV3 is not a public broadcaster and is still running that continuous coverage. Tells us that, you know, there is money to be made in local news. But I certainly would say that there is still an argument for having a public broadcaster that is going to focus on local issues.
Claudette, your best friend forever now.
Well, I just want to talk about that coverage though, that media coverage. At the end of the day, people want to know what's going on. People have family down there. They have family in these disaster zones. So while we might talk about the ratings and the media and, you know, all that kind of stuff, at the end of the day, the public want to know how their family are doing. They want to know, and they need to know, and they expect to have some kind of coverage. The other thing about that was that the Australians were actually first to the coverage. We weren't. So and also CNN were first to the coverage on that, and we weren't. It took Radio New Zealand till 7 a.m. in the morning to get up some coverage. The first pics we were seeing were people sending their pics up on Twitter and on Facebook. So, so these agencies rushed out to go and get this, but they weren't as quick as what we actually should have expected them to be. So yes, TV3, they're not our public broadcaster. And they had technical difficulties. I'm concerned that a staff member at that organisation, complained and criticise their organisation, knowing full well that they didn't have the capability to do that. Now is not a time, in moments of disaster, now is not a time to turn around and talk about things like ratings. Sorry to have to say, even though I'm firmly ensconced in the media.
Indeed.
Now is a time to rally around those people to ensure that everybody gets the same information.
Well, let's talk about that then. Your best friend forever, John Key, was off to see the Queen for high tea on Friday, but on reflection, it seems juxtapositioned images of him with the corgis while Christchurch residents shivered wasn't going to work, was it? Why did it take so long? Why did it take so long for him to make that decision?
He did not reflect on anything.
Well, come Tuesday, he changed the decision,
I don't know where you get that word from. I don't think that the Prime Minister had any compunction to go once this happened.
Yeah, but during the weekend on Q&A and The Nation, he made it quite clear he was still off to the meeting. And it wasn't until Tuesday when they made the decision.
Yes, but I don't know why you're using the word on reflection.
Maybe he had the weekend to reflect over it. He was on media saying he was going. Monday he said he was going. Then all of a sudden Tuesday...
When you use, and you know, this is really typical of you left-wing bloggers. You use emotive words to conjure up some kind of conspiracy amongst it.
So what changed on Saturday,
reflection,
Sunday,
it means that
Monday?
a decision was made based on some personalised internal turmoil, when really it was based on good, clear facts and hard, evidence that, the leader of our country shouldn't go, and he didn't go.
Do you think the people of Christchurch were more concerned that Jerry Brownlow was being left in charge? That would concern me.
Well, you know what? My whānau down there would be more concerned about running water, about whether or not they've got somewhere to live, and how they're going to survive the next day.
So it was a bad idea for Prime Minister to consider going.
What
on
I think you're doing is actually removing the personalised perspective of this disaster. And you're putting it into a category where you're actually trying to muckrake and create some kind of fear based around these leaders. The people of Christchurch are
looking for some leadership.
And they've got leadership.
They've got leadership. But they didn't have it on Saturday, they didn't have it on Sunday, they didn't so much have it on Monday, but Tuesday, after John Armstrong published his very critical... Who said they didn't have
it? Who said they didn't?
John Armstrong came out with a very critical
another
column
media
on Tuesday morning,
journalist.
And it was
Tell me
until
the people
that
in
came out...
Christchurch that said they didn't have any leadership. You name the people in Christchurch.
Well, perhaps they can send in their
I
thoughts on
this.
Phoebe, why could the government bail out the South Island Mr Magoo Alan Hubbard by questionably extending the guarantee scheme to South Canterbury Finance, but not extend a bailout to the 10,000 uninsured Christchurch quake survivors? How was Mr Magoo not a moral hazard, yet the 10,000 uninsured are a moral hazard?
I think both clearly are a moral hazard, and this has been the debate that's been raging over the blogosphere for the last few days. Certainly when they introduced the deposit guarantee scheme, there was a worry that if they didn't do that, that money would flow out to Australia, and that would worsen the economic crisis in New Zealand. So we had that introduced, we've had it extended and very questionably applied to South Canterbury Finance. Now we've had the earthquake. I don't think National would have secured that bailout had the earthquake been in reverse order. And I think it's certainly a real shame for those people that are uninsured. Okay, certainly there is a moral obligation to insure your properties, but we have just had a recession in New Zealand, which meant that many people have been cutting back on those sorts of expenses. So I think there needs to be some very hard questions asked about why we've got so much money going to let's face it, a sector of our society that has the money to invest in these kind of schemes. We've had investors from places like Hanover not get any money back, yet we've got this massive $1.6 billion bailout that is going to people who chose to risk their money on the stock market.
Labor bailed out uninsured flood victims and it didn't lead to a massive drop-off in people taking insurance. Is this double standards by National?
I'm not too sure about the bailout of uninsured flood victims. I know that they gave, it was around $65,000 if you had a farm of a particular size to help you get on your feet. I think that certainly an event like this is not going to cause a drop in insurance, okay, and that when they're talking about the message going out for people not to be uninsured, I think that actually these sorts of events raise people's anxiety levels and encourage them to take insurance.
Yeah.
Now, we're already seeing that the people that have taken insurance are also having problems. On the news last night, on Target last night, there were people from AMI Insurance where they are being refused insurance in Christchurch.
Yeah.
So certainly I think that there needs to be a parliamentary inquiry into that bailout, and there needs to be some very hard questions asked.
Claudette, Peter Dunn this week denounced media vultures descending upon Christchurch, and as the vast scale of damage starts to sink in, it won't take long for the complaints that not enough is being done to get things back up and running. How do you media manage that? Is it endless shots of politicians handing out hot food?
Well, you know, I think one of the things that was said earlier on was that the media went in and focused on the grieving families, those that had lost a lot. But, you know, and those are the things that pull at the heartstrings of, you know, those that weren't involved in that. And yes, those are the types of stories that do get up the ratings if we're going to talk about ratings. Can I just want to, you know, I know I'm jumping around, but, you know, I want to say something about that SCF, and it's just a byline story. But 2 boys were arrested and jailed for 2 years for stealing a candy bar out of a dairy.
Pineapple lumps.
Yeah, for pineapple
lumps worth $2.90.
2 years. 2 years jail.
More than 2 years.
Why?
That was actually going to be my last word.
They were jailed for 2 years for stealing pineapple lumps, and this is what happens. And you know, the finance companies get off scot-free, community service, nothing at all.
That's remarkable.
And 2 Māori boys. Yep, one of them didn't have any record, and yep, they're criminals, and yes, they stole, but 2 years for a packet of pineapple lumps.
Hone Harawira has a great blog on this, where basically they got done as if it was aggravated crime. They stole a $2.90 bag of pineapple lumps, and I think that when you look at this bailout compared to instances like that, you know, it's horrifying.
Unbelievable, isn't it? My God. Okay, here's a question to both of you. The only fatality so far has been the truth, with Cameron Slater making an out-of-context, sleazy edit of Jim Anderton saying something he didn't, while it's taken a 7.1 magnitude earthquake to make Bob Parker look competent. How does all of this impact on the Christchurch Melody race?
Yes, I think that was the first thing that I thought about, was that with this kind of coverage, of course, you know, he's the incumbent mayor, and so Mr. Parker, and so they're going to have to focus on him, and he's doing a magnificent job, I've got to say. Earlier on, was it Jim Anderton, and somebody had said it'll take a seismic earthquake.
Well, no, that's the edit that dirty little Cameron Slater came up with.
Yeah,
that took out a comment he'd said out of context, which has now been proven to be complete false.
Yeah, false.
But the idea still remains, doesn't it?
That's right.
Cameron
that's absolutely.
Slater. We'll have him on next week. Who do you think? How's this going to impact the melting?
Well, I think it makes Bob Parker look very good, because I would agree with you that, Claudette, that he is very good in a crisis. And I think that the issue with Jim Anderton down there has always been that he's leader of the Progressives as well. So there's been this issue around him being potentially a part-time mayor. And I think that the media focusing on Bob Parker has really perhaps, you know, further dented Anderton's campaign. Yeah.
Claudette, who wins, who loses from the earthquake?
Well, you know, the whole of Ngāi Tahu and the whole of Canterbury lose. You know, there are no winners in this. At the end of the day.
This talk of a mini boom, that's really cold comfort, isn't it?
Oh, well, you know, I'm talking in terms of human interest. There are no winners in this kind of thing. However, you use the word vultures, there will be a huge number of vultures swooping down. There'll be a huge number of people promising these people financial assistance, and it'll come at a huge price to them. And they probably won't get to see the end of that, end of the tunnel, if these vultures are allowed to swoop down on top of these people.
Phoebe, who wins, who loses with the earthquake?
Well, I think everyone loses, don't they? Certainly in New Zealand, and certainly the people of Christchurch. It's going to be a very stressful time for them. I know I have relatives that were in the 2004 floods, and certainly rebuilding after these sort of events is very difficult. You've got the negotiations with insurance companies, you've got the clean-up to face. You know, it's going to be a very long process for the people of Canterbury.